about phonics. The objectives for this session are to define phonics, graphemes, and phonemes, examine the relationship between phonics instruction and graphemes, explore the steps in phonics instruction, explore encoding and decoding in phonics instruction, learn the importance of phonics instruction and why it should be systematic. Phonics refers to instruction that leads to the recognition of the relationship between the letters, which are the graphemes of written language, and the individual sounds, which we know from previously are the phonemes of spoken language. It is a method of teaching students to read using letter sounds. Once students learn the sounds or phonemes, they can blend them together to make, read, and write words. The first stage of phonics is for students to tune in to hearing everyday sounds and to then progress to hearing the sounds at the beginning of words. Phonics is the study of the relationships between letters and the sounds they represent, also used to describe reading instruction that teaches sound-symbol correspondence. The main goal of phonics is to help children develop an understanding of the alphabetic principle. The alphabetic principle involves the understanding that letters represent sounds and that the letters and sounds are combined to form words. It is also the understanding that there is a connection between spoken sounds and written language. The alphabetic principle is the concept that each letter of the alphabet has one or two sounds associated with it, and that those letter-sound relationships are stable. This means that children become used to the idea that the S in the name Sally makes the same sounds in the words Saul, Sat, and Sam. Understanding the alphabetic principle is essential to learning to read, since letter-sound knowledge is a prerequisite to effective word identification. A primary difference between good and poor readers is the ability to use letter-sound correspondence to decode words. Graphemes are the letters that represent sounds in words. Graphemes can be made up of one letter or several letters. There are around 44 phonemes or sounds in the English language, but there are around 250 graphemes, letters or letter groups, that correspond to a single sound. This is because most phonemes corresponds to more than one grapheme, letter or letter groups across different words. There are 4 types of graphemes: single letter graphemes such as B, P, and T, digraphs, which are 2 letters that make one sound such as CH, SH, TH, and trigraphs, which are 3 letters that make one sound such as I, and the word sigh, or light, but without the L and the T. Some research also identify 4-letter graphemes. Phonics instruction is geared towards helping students to recognize the relationship between these graphemes and the phonemes in spoken language. Children are taught about graphemes as a part of phonics instruction. The graphemes are the letters students write when they hear a phoneme. Preschoolers first notice graphemes that are common, meaningful, and useful to them, such as the letters representing the sounds in their name. For example, when a child Sally says the sound S at the beginning of her name, this is a phoneme, but it is a grapheme when she writes the letter S. Learning about the relationship between graphemes and phonemes is essential, as it is this ability that allows students to transcribe what they hear into written words. Phonics instruction in the early years begins with the most common single-letter graphemes, for example, S, A, T, P, I, N, M, and D, and common 2-letter graphemes known as digraphs, which are the CH, SH, TH, WH, and CK letter graphemes. In the first grade, these are retaught, but the written words are also learned. Students will continue to learn graphemes in the 2nd and 3rd grade and onwards with more complex letter blends. For example, trigraphs, double and triple blends, silent letters, and diphthongs. There are numerous other graphemes and many different spelling patterns and rules that students will need to learn as they advance in phonics instruction and begin to read. Take a moment to look through the phonics patterns in this document. What do you notice, and how familiar are you with the graphemes? There are a number of different approaches to phonics instruction. Synthetic and analytic are the most popular approaches. However, research has shown that the most effective approach to phonics instruction is synthetic. In a synthetic approach, students are systematically and explicitly taught how to convert letters or letter combinations into sounds, and then how to blend the sounds together to form recognizable words. The National Reading Panel conducted an exhaustive review of research on phonics and drew the following conclusions. An essential part of the process for beginners involves learning the alphabetic system, that is, letter-sound correspondences and spelling patterns, and learning how to apply this knowledge in their reading. Systematic phonics instruction makes a bigger contribution to children's growth in reading than alternative programs providing unsystematic or no phonics instruction. Phonics instruction taught early proved much more effective than phonics instruction introduced after first grade. These results indicate clearly that systematic phonics instruction in kindergarten and first grade is highly beneficial, and the children at these developmental levels are quite capable of learning phonemic and phonics concepts. The purpose of phonics instruction is to teach students sound spelling relationships and how to use these relationships to read words. Phonics instruction should be explicit and systematic. It is explicit in that sound spelling relationships are directly taught. Students are told, for example, that the letter S stands for the sound. It is systematic in that it follows a scope and a sequence that allows students to form and read words early on. The skills taught are constantly reviewed, practiced, and applied to real reading until students develop automaticity. Explicit phonics instruction involves direct explanation. Review this video link after the presentation and note how the teacher's language is concise and specific. Explicit instruction means that the actions of the teacher are clear, unambiguous, direct, and visible. This makes it clear that what the students are to do and what they're going to learn. Nothing is left to guesswork. During explicit instruction, teachers can use a strategy such as I do, we do, you do to show students what to do, how to blend, practice with them so students can do it with the teacher, and the students do it on their own to show their teacher that they know how to do it. This is the check for understanding. As the teacher observes, she can evaluate what help students may need and provide feedback to enhance their use of letter-sound correspondence. In phonics-based instruction, the goal is to teach students to read and write the most common letter-sound relationships so that they can easily blend and segment words until these words become part of their sight vocabulary. This is called recognition. It is a crucial step in the reading process. In a systematic explicit phonics program, instruction begins with the most common, least ambiguous relationships and gradually introduces less common and more complex patterns. Once students know a few consonants and vowels, they can begin to apply their letter-sound knowledge to decode and read words in isolation or in connected text. This is the first step in learning to read. Letter-sound correspondence, or the relationship of the letters and graphemes to the sounds that they make, which is the phonemes, is a key component of the alphabetic principle in learning to read. To teach letter-sound correspondence, it is easier for students to learn the sounds of these letters that contain their sound in the initial position in their names, followed by those letters whose sounds are embedded within the letter's name, leaving for those letters whose sounds are not found in the letter's name, such as H, W, and Y, and then advancing to digraphs, blends, and more complex sounds as students get older. For each letter-sound relationship, it is suggested that instruction include naming the letter or letters that represent the sound and associating a picture cue of an object with the target sound to help students remember the relationship between the letter and the sound. Take a few minutes after this presentation to review this video in the slide. Once students become comfortable with at least half of their letter-sound relationships, you can move on to decoding and blending. Decoding is recognizing that each letter makes a specific sound, and blending is putting those sounds together to read the word. This is the process of reading that many of us know as sounding it out. However, decoding involves more than just knowing the letter-sound correspondences. To be a proficient decoder, instruction must also include syllables, syllabication, and morphemes. Take a look at the example provided by the National Reading Panel. A reader comes across an unknown word. With knowledge of phonics, he can try to read the word by focusing on the specific sound of each letter or combination of letters. For example, if a child does not recognize the word chant, he might break the word apart into pieces, such as ch, and, t, or ch, and, t. assigning an appropriate sound to each separate letter or a combination of the letters. Then the child can combine those sounds to create the word chant. Decoding and blending takes a lot of practice, and it's best to start with simple words when you are doing this process, and especially sets of word families. Word families are groups of words that have a common feature or pattern. They have some of the same combination of letters in them and a similar sound. For example, at, cat, hat, and fat are a family of words with the at sound and letter combination in common. Letter sound correspondence is also used in writing or encoding text. For example, if a child is trying to spell smart, she might begin with the S sound and write S. Then she goes on to the next sound, and write M, and so on. An early phonics learner often achieves a close approximation of correct spelling rather than complete accuracy. For example, she may attempt to spell the word smart using the method above, but end up with the word SMRT simply because she only heard the dominant R in the AR sound letter combination. As students advance in their phonics knowledge, they will also begin to use blends, word families, rhymes, digraphs, diphthongs, and phonics rules, especially irregular spelling patterns, to assist when reading and spelling. Why is phonics instruction important? Research says that the combination of instruction and phonological awareness in phonics appears to be the most favorable for successful early reading. Good readers must have a strategy to phonologically decode words. As children begin to read, they must develop knowledge of how print works. Key to this understanding is knowledge of the alphabetic system. In order for children to successfully learn to read, they must be able to relate the sounds of language with the letters of written language. However, phonics instruction should never dominate a reading program. It shouldn't be the only thing in a reading program. Teachers can provide controlled vocabulary text that allows students to practice decoding and fluency, and they can also read quality literature to students to build a sense of story and to develop vocabulary and comprehension. While phonics is a big piece, it is just one piece of the puzzle of learning how to read. Please take a few minutes to review these resources at the end of the presentation on the slideshows. Finally, these are excellent references if you have additional questions about phonics.